Hello and welcome to Stanza. In this tutorial, we're going to cover how to use the product in Premiere, Final Cut Pro 10, and After Effects. Before we begin, you're going to want to download the project and the frame rate you'll be working in. Stanza includes 24, 25, and 30 frames per second versions. Along with the actual transitions, there's an optional pre-rendered guide that shows you what each transition will look like when applied to your footage. You won't use this in your actual project, but it's a nice feature to quickly view a finished version of each transition. Now, the actual transitions use a ProRes codec, so if you're using Windows, you'll want to make sure that you have the latest QuickTime player installed so that your computer recognizes the video. Once you've completed these steps, we're ready to begin. Let's start in Premiere. So we're in Premiere, and I have two clips in the timeline with a hard cut in between. I've imported the transition that I want to use, and the way we apply this is we're going to overlap these two clips like so, and then we're going to take the transition and place it on top. Now we want to align the clips in such a way that the second clip and the transition are aligned in the beginning, and the transition and the bottommost layer are aligned at the end. So once everything is aligned and overlapped, we can go to the effects panel and we're going to apply an effect called track matte key. We don't want to apply it to the transition, we want to apply it to the second clip, like so. We'll go to the effects controls panel, and at the bottom we can see our effect. Under matte, what we're going to do is we're going to select video 3. Now what this option is referring to are these rows down below. We have V1, V2, and V3. Our transition is currently on V3, and what this is doing is just pointing this effect to wherever our transition is. So we're going to point it to V3, video 3, and make sure that composite is matte alpha, and we have our transition. Now, if all of these clips were one row above, this would make our transition on V4, so we would have to change that within the effects controls panel to V4 right here. So just depending on where the transition is will dictate, what you set this option to. That's how you transition from one clip to another. Now you can also transition from black to a clip or transition out from a clip to black. And the way you do that is, let's just delete one of those clips. We have a clip in the timeline. Again, we'll place the transition above, but this time we're going to align it at the beginning, just making sure both clips are aligned at the beginning. And then we're going to apply the track matte key to this bottom layer, and then we're going to point this to V2 since the transition is on the second row. And matte alpha stays the same, and we have our transition from black to a clip. Now transitioning from a clip to black, we're going to take the transition and we're going to align it with the end of the clip. So just making sure both of these are aligned. And then as of right now with our settings, it looks kind of weird. This is not what we want. So we're going to go back to the effects controls panel, and under track matte key, we're going to select matte luma instead of alpha, and then we're going to also enable this reverse option, and that's going to give us our transition out. So that's how you use the transitions in Premiere. Let's jump into Final Cut. In Final Cut Pro 10, I have two clips in the storyline, and I want to apply this transition. To do so, we're going to drag the transition into the storyline and align it with the end of the first clip. Make sure it sits right above the first clip. Next, we're going to select the transition and go to the inspector and scroll all the way down under compositing and blend mode. We're going to select silhouette alpha. Once that's taken care of, we can select both the first clip and the transition, right click, and hit new compound clip. We'll go ahead and hit OK. And now we can use the playhead to find the beginning of the transition and simply take the second clip, drag it underneath, and align it with the beginning of the transition. And that's how you transition from one clip to another. Let's go back to the beginning And if we want to transition just one clip, let's say from black to a clip, if you want to do like a transition in, you're going to take your clip, take the transition and align it with the beginning of the clip. And then under the blend mode, instead of doing silhouette alpha, we're going to do stencil alpha. And that's going to give us our transition in. To do a transition out, we're going to move this transition to the end of the clip, and then we're going to go back to silhouette alpha. And that'll give us our transition out. So you can transition from one clip to another, transition from black to a clip, or transition out from a clip to black. Let's go into After Effects. Inside After Effects, the way to apply the transitions is through a track mat. So I have two clips in the comp right now, and I want to apply this transition here. So we'll drag it into the timeline above the first clip. And what we want to do is align these two clips at the end right here. So we'll just align those. And then next, we're going to take the second clip, which is now the first layer. We're going to drag this to the bottom, and then we're going to move it to the left until the beginning of this layer is aligned with the transition. So we'll just move it down here. Next, we're going to select the first clip, which is now the second layer. And under track mat, if you don't see this, by the way, you can just right click and under columns, enable it here with modes. Under track mat, we're going to select alpha inverted. And this is going to create the transition. And that's how you transition from one clip to another. With transitioning out, it's the exact same method, just without this second clip. So what I've done is taken the transition and you align it with the end of the clip, and then with the clip, you change the track mat to alpha inverted, and that's going to transition it to black. Transitioning from black to the clip, like a transition in, is a little bit more complex. Let's change this to no track mat. We have the beginning, and then we have the transition. And what we want to do is actually just create a solid, and we're going to make it the comp size, make sure it's black, hit OK, and we're just going to make sure that this is the length of the transition. So we're just going to splice it here. Now, instead of applying the track mat to this layer, we're going to apply it to this black layer. So let's make sure that the transition is on top. So we'll just move it on top. And then with the black layer, we're going to go to track mat, and then we're going to go to alpha inverted. So it's just going to go like so. So what it's really doing is actually creating the transition with the black and making it resolve into the clip. So that's it's a little bit more of a hack for doing a transition in, but I think it works quite nicely. So that is how you use Stanza in Premiere, Final Cut Pro 10, and After Effects. I hope you enjoy this pack and have a lot of fun with it. You can do a lot of complex things like stacking different transitions on top of each other, using them on titles or text, or using and incorporating colored backgrounds to really add a lot of style and flair to your footage. I do want to note that within Premiere especially, you want to make sure that the footage that you're using is all the same resolution. We've come across a couple of glitchy behaviors if you're using 1080p footage and 4K footage and doing some scaling. So just make sure that if you are using 4K footage, nest it into a 1080p resolution timeline just to make sure that the transitions don't do anything abnormal. But anyway, enjoy the pack, have fun, and let us know if you have any comments or concerns or questions. You can contact us at support@rocketstock.com.